70% of deaf children experience a form of neglect so severe it rewires their brains. It's not malice. It's a silence born from a world that won't learn to speak their language. This is the invisible cage one little girl was born into, a cage made doubly impenetrable because her father was the most feared drug lord in the city. Everyone saw only his shadow, but a waitress clearing tables for minimum wage saw a lonely child, and she wrote a note. That waitress was Maria, working double shifts at a diner called the Golden Griddle, a world away from the cartel's fortified mansions. She was 3 months behind on rent, invisible to the wealthy clients she served. But on a rainy Tuesday night, her ordinary world was about to collide with a legend of violence named Eduardo El Silencio Vargas, and the daughter nobody dared to look at. The rain that night was a steady hiss against the diner's neon sign. Maria's feet were blistered from 12 hours in non-slip shoes, the smell of old grease a permanent layer on her skin. She was wiping down table 6 when the bell above the door didn't just jingle, it went silent, choked by the presence of the 2 men who entered first. They scanned the room with a hollow, professional detachment. These weren't customers. They were perimeter scouts. Every regular in the booth-lined room seemed to shrink inward. Conversations died mid-sentence. This was the effect of Eduardo Vargas, known on the street as El Silencio. Not for being quiet, but for the silence that followed his decisions. He controlled the city's northern corridor, a multi-million-dollar pipeline of narcotics and fear. His reputation was a series of whispered myths. The rival buried alive in a construction site, the detective whose family received his badge in a polished wooden box. And then he walked in. He wore a simple black raincoat, no flashy jewelry, but his eyes, dark and assessing, calculated the threat level of every soul in the room, pricing their loyalty or their fear. The manager, Frank, scurried from the back, wiping his hands on a towel that trembled. "Mr. Vargas, your usual booth is ready." But Maria's gaze slipped past the legend to the small figure half hidden behind him. A girl, maybe 8 or 9, in a yellow raincoat too bright for the grim evening. Her dark hair was plastered to her forehead. She clutched a worn notebook against her chest. This was Lucia, his daughter, the one subject the neighborhood rumors agreed upon. She was deaf. She was kept away from other children, and you did not look at her. Frank's panicked whisper cut through the static in Maria's head. "You, take them, don't mess up, don't stare." He shoved a menu into her hands. As she approached the corner booth, cleared and sanitized with frantic speed, she saw what the rumors missed. The girl's eyes, the same shape as her father's, held none of his calculation. They held a trapped, weary loneliness. Lucia stared at the Formica tabletop, her small shoulders hunched as if making herself smaller was a survival skill she'd mastered young. Vargas ordered a black coffee without looking at the menu. He did not speak for his daughter. The other diners deliberately averted their eyes, a practiced choreography of avoidance. To them, Lucia was an extension of her father's danger, a cursed object. But Maria saw a child drowning in a silent world, surrounded by people too terrified to throw her a rope. Then she remembered the research, the stark statistics burning in her mind from a college psychology class she'd almost finished. Up to 70% of deaf children experience linguistic neglect. Their brains, starving for connection in the critical early years, can be permanently rewired by the silence. This wasn't just isolation. It was a form of starvation happening in plain sight, at a corner booth in a cheap diner. "Does your daughter want anything? Hot chocolate?" Maria asked, the question directed at Vargas but her eyes on Lucia. Vargas's gaze lifted slowly, as if surprised she'd acknowledged the girl's existence. "She does not speak," he stated, his voice flat. "A final warning." Lucia's fingers tightened on her notebook. A flush of shame crept up her neck. In that moment, Maria didn't see a drug lord's daughter. She saw herself at 9 years old, sitting in a social worker's office after her mother's funeral, unable to make a sound because the grief had tied her voice in knots. The world had talked around her, too. Without overthinking, Maria reached for the pen behind her ear and the order pad from her apron. She knelt slightly, bringing herself to Lucia's eye level, and placed the pad on the table. She wrote just 2 words in careful block letters: hot chocolate. She slid the pad toward the girl. Lucia's head snapped up. Her eyes, wide with shock, darted from the words to Maria's face, then to her father's impassive stare. The entire diner held its breath. Slowly, Lucia pulled her own notebook close. She uncapped a purple pen and wrote a single, looping word: yes. A smile, small and fragile as a moth's wing, touched the girl's lips. Maria smiled back, a genuine warmth cutting through her own fatigue. "1 hot chocolate," she said, standing. Vargas said nothing, but his eyes, those dark, calculating eyes, were no longer scanning the room. They were fixed solely on Maria, weighing this simple act of pen and paper as if it were a complex betrayal. The silence at the table now felt different, not empty, but charged. Maria delivered the drinks. When she set down the mug of hot chocolate, Lucia had opened her notebook to a fresh page. She'd drawn a simple, smiling sun. Under it, she wrote, "Thank you." This time, Maria didn't use the pad. She took her own pen and wrote beneath the sun, "You're welcome, and my name is Maria." The exchange lasted 10 seconds, but in the economy of a lonely child, it was a fortune. As Maria cleared the next table, she felt the weight of Vargas's stare like a physical pressure between her shoulder blades. She broken the unspoken rule. She had looked. She had communicated. When they left an hour later, Vargas paid in cash, leaving a pile of bills on the table. As Maria went to clear it, she froze. Under the empty coffee cup, she found 5 $100 bills, and beneath them, carefully placed, was a small, folded piece of notebook paper. She unfolded it. In a child's careful script, it read, "Please be here tomorrow." The money was a king's ransom for a $40 check. The note was a lifeline thrown from a silent island. Her coworker, Chloe, sidled up, her voice a harsh whisper. "Are you insane? You touched the notebook. Do you know what happens to people who get close to them?" His last driver disappeared for asking too many questions about the girl. Maria pocketed the money and the note, her heart hammering. She had made a choice in a moment of recognition. Now, the consequences of that choice were waiting in the rainy dark outside, in the form of a man who traded in secrets and silence, and a little girl who had just dared to ask for one thing: to be seen. The next evening, her shift started at 5. At 4:55, Frank found her at the time clock, his face pale. He called, "Vargas, he requested you personally. Corner booth at 7, don't be late." He leaned in, the smell of stale coffee on his breath. "And Maria," he asked if you had a working cell phone. The ordinary world of rent and blisters was gone. She had stepped into the story now. And as 7 o'clock approached, Maria realized the note wasn't just a request. It was an invitation into a gilded cage, and she had already said yes. 7 o'clock arrived with the heavy finality of a locked door. The diner was unusually quiet, as if word had spread that the lion's den was occupied. When the door opened, it wasn't just Vargas and Lucia. A third man entered, older, with a scar through his eyebrow, who took a seat at the counter, his back to the wall, watching everyone who moved. A sentry. Lucia's face, however, broke into a visible, radiant smile the moment she saw Maria. She carried the same purple notebook. Vargas noted his daughter's reaction, his own expression unreadable. He guided her to the booth, his hand on her shoulder, not with force, but with a protective gravity. Maria approached, her order pad already in hand. She didn't wait for Vargas to speak. She wrote on a fresh page, "HILUCIA, chocolate again," and slid it over. The girl nodded eagerly, then grabbed her pen. "Yes, did you get him? Why note?" "I did." Maria wrote back, "I'm here." The simple exchange lasted less than 15 seconds, but for Lucia it was a conversation, a real one. Vargas observed in silence, then spoke, his voice low. "She would not stop writing about you. She has filled pages." It wasn't an accusation, it was data. I'm glad, Maria said, meeting his gaze for a heartbeat before looking back to Lucia. She's a good writer. She has few outlets, Vargas said, the word carefully chosen. He ordered an espresso. The scarred man at the counter ordered nothing. He just watched. Throughout the meal, Maria returned more often than necessary. Each time, a new note was waiting. Lucia asked questions. Do you have a cat? What is your favorite color? Do you like the rain? Maria answered each one in careful print, the notepad becoming a bridge across the silent void the world had built around this child. When they left, Vargas paid in cash again. Under the bill was another note, this one in an unfamiliar, precise script. Your shift ends at 11. A car will be outside. It will take you home. The rain is heavy. It wasn't a question, it was logistics, a command wrapped in courtesy. Maria's skin prickled. How did he know her schedule? The note from Lucia had been a plea. This was a demonstration of power. He knew where she worked when she finished. The car was a courtesy, but also a cage on wheels. At 11:05, the black SUV was idling by the bus stop. The scarred man from the counter was driving. He rolled down the window. Miss Ruiz, get in. It's not safe to wait here. She wanted to refuse, to assert her fraying independence. But the rain was a cold curtain and the bus was 40 minutes late on a good night. She got in. The interior was immaculate, smelling of leather and faint cigar smoke. The man didn't speak. The silence was oppressive. As they pulled up to her rundown apartment building, he finally spoke. He likes you, the girl, that is a rare thing. He handed her a business card, blank except for a single handwritten phone number, for emergencies or changes in schedule. Maria took the card, feeling its weight like a lead coin. What's your name? She asked, a feeble attempt to humanize the moment. Rafael, he said, his eyes meeting hers in the rearview mirror. Sleep well, Miss Ruiz. The gift started the next day. A bag of high-quality groceries left outside her door, not random items, but the specific brand of tea she bought, the type of apples she liked. The following day, a delivery of books, classic children's novels with notes inside in Lucia's writing. This one has a girl who speak either. They were thoughtful, they were terrifying. Each was a brick in a wall of obligation, a silent message. We are watching, we provide, you belong to us now. Chloe, her coworker, was frantic. Maria, this is how it starts. The favors, the attention. My cousin worked for a guy like this. First it's rides and groceries. Then it's I need you to hold this package. Then you're in so deep, the only way out is a ditch. But another part of Maria, the part that had been lonely and struggling since her mother died, felt a perverse thrill. Someone, for the first time in years, was paying attention. And not just anyone, a man of immense power. And his daughter, a luminous, trapped soul, was blossoming before her eyes through simple notes. 3 days later, the request changed. The note delivered by Rafael with the morning grocery drop was again in Vargas's precise hand. Lucia has a school presentation on Friday. She is nervous. She has asked if you will attend. The car will collect you at 5 p.m. A school, the word was a shock. Maria had imagined the girl tutored in some fortified room, but a school implied a world trying to be normal. She wrote back on the reverse side of the note, I would be honored. What is the school? The answer came that evening via text message to her personal phone, a number she had never given out. Westgate Academy for the Deaf. Dress comfortably. Friday arrived. The SUV picked her up. This time Vargas was inside. Lucia sat between them, vibrating with excitement, her notebook open on her lap. MY project is about DOLPHINS. They use sonar, but I think they signed too. Vargas was dressed more casually, a charcoal sweater instead of a coat. He looked for the first time like a father, not a lord. She has not stopped preparing, he said, a note of pride in his voice. The teachers, they are skilled, but they are employees. You are her friend. He said the word as if it were a foreign, precious object. Westgate Academy was a modern, single-story building with wide halls and visual alarms. Maria saw other children signing rapidly to each other, their faces animated. Lucia, holding her father's hand, signed a greeting to a classmate. This was her world. Here, she wasn't strange. She was just Lucia. The presentation was simple. Lucia stood before a small group of parents and students, using a series of large cards with drawings and written facts about dolphin communication. She didn't speak aloud, but she signed her presentation with a fierce, clear concentration. Maria watched, her throat tight. This was the child freed from her isolation, in her element. Afterward, over juice boxes in the classroom, Lucia's teacher, a woman named Ms. Alvarez, approached Maria. "You must be the friend from the diner. Lucia talks about you constantly in her journal." She lowered her voice. "It's a remarkable shift. Her engagement has doubled in a week. That connection, it's everything for children like her. The research is unequivocal. Without genuine social connection, academic progress is a house built on sand." The teacher's words, echoing the cold statistics Maria knew, made the stakes real. This wasn't just kindness, it was intervention. Vargas watched the interaction, his face thoughtful. On the ride back, Lucia fell asleep against Maria's shoulder, exhausted and happy. The silence in the car was comfortable, familial. Vargas spoke softly. Her mother, Isabella, was hearing. She was learning sign language when Lucia was born. She was determined. He stared out the window at the passing city. The men who killed her 3 years ago did not care that she was holding a children's sign language book. They only cared that she was my wife. The confession hung in the air, a raw wound laid bare. The violence wasn't abstract. It had a name, a face, a favorite book. Maria understood now the source of the fortress around Lucia. It wasn't just power, it was trauma. "Thank you," Vargas said, looking at her finally. "For today, for the notes. You have given her a window. I would like to give you something in return." Maria's pulse quickened. "The gifts are already too much." "Not a gift, an offer," he corrected. "Come to our home tomorrow for dinner. A proper thank you. Lucia wishes to show you her room, her books." It was the crossing of the ultimate threshold. The diner was neutral ground. The school was semi-public. His home was the heart of the fortress, the inner sanctum. To enter was to be fully absorbed. Before she could answer, her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. A grainy, zoomed-in photo taken from across the street. It was of her, Vargas, and Lucia standing outside the school just 30 minutes earlier. Underneath, a caption. "A pretty little bird has flown into the wrong cage. Does she know who built it?" A cold terror, different from any she had felt before, seized her. This wasn't from Vargas. This was a warning, or a threat. She showed the phone to Vargas. His face hardened into the mask of the drug lord, all softness erased. He took the phone, examined the number, and handed it to Raphael in the front seat with a single, quiet command. "Trace it, now." He turned back to Maria, his voice low and urgent. "You will come to dinner tomorrow. You will not go back to your apartment tonight. It is not secure." He saw the protest forming on her lips. "This is not a discussion. The men who sent this text are the same kind of men who killed Isabella. They do not make empty threats. They see a vulnerability. They see you." Lucia stirred in her sleep, sensing the tension. Maria looked from the child's peaceful face to the terrifying photo on her phone. The choice was gone. The moment she wrote that first note, she had become a piece on a very dangerous board. Now, the opposing player had made their move. The car didn't turn toward her apartment. It merged onto the highway, heading for the hills, for the gated world of Eduardo Vargas. The city lights receded below them. Maria was no longer just visiting the cage. She was being pulled inside it for her own protection. And as the wrought iron security gates swung open silently, she understood the true cost of her act of connection. She had seen a lonely girl, but in the world of El Silencio, being seen was the most dangerous thing of all. The house was not a mansion, but a fortress disguised as a home. Wrought iron gave way to 10-foot concrete walls topped with subtle wire. Cameras tracked their approach from within fake rock formations. Raphael spoke into a wrist mic. "Package secure. Gate 4. The term package made Maria flinch. She was no longer a person. She was an asset in transit. Inside, the contrast was disorienting. The foyer was warm, with a worn Persian rug and the smell of simmering garlic and tomatoes. A woman in her 60s, her silver hair in a neat bun, wiped her hands on an apron as she hurried forward. Her eyes, the same dark, intelligent shape as Vargas's, swept over Maria with neither fear nor judgment, but deep curiosity. "Mama, this is Maria," Vargas said, his voice softening. "Maria, my mother, Elena." "Welcome, child," Elena said, her English touched with a Spanish rhythm. "Lucia has been counting the minutes." She looked at her son. "Raphael told me about the message. The guest room is prepared." So this was the plan. She was staying. The decision had been made somewhere between the school and the gate, in a silent language of threat assessment she didn't speak. Lucia appeared at the top of a curved staircase, her face alight. She bounded down, her notebook already open. "You came to my house." Maria forced a smile, writing back, "It's beautiful. Will you show me?" The tour was a study in contradictions. A sun-drenched kitchen where Elena cooked. A living room with comfortable sofas and family photos. A younger Vargas with a smiling woman, Isabella, holding a baby Lucia. And then a door off the hallway that led not to another room, but to a sleek, windowless office. Maria caught a glimpse of multiple computer monitors, a wall of secure phones, before Vargas gently guided her away. Lucia's room was a sanctuary. Bookshelves overflowed. Dolphin figurines covered every surface. In the corner stood a small, beautiful piano. Lucia wrote, "Mommy Played. Daddy says I have her hands." Dinner was a quiet affair. Elena served a rich stew. Vargas asked polite questions about Maria's family, her studies. They felt like verification checks confirming a file he already possessed. Halfway through the meal, Raphael entered and nodded once at Vargas. A silent signal. The trace was complete. After dessert, Elena took Lucia upstairs for a bath. Vargas gestured for Maria to follow him to a book-lined study. He poured 2 glasses of water, his movements deliberate. The number was a burner phone, purchased for cash this morning in the city center. "It is now inactive." He paused. The photo was taken by a man named Mateo Rosas. "He is a scout for the Delgado cartel, my competitors." He said it so matter-of-factly. A scout, competitors, like they were rival businesses, not organizations of murderers. "Why send it to me? Why not to you?" Maria asked, her voice small. "To frighten you, to make you run, or to make you come to me for protection, which you did. Both outcomes give them leverage. You are a new variable in their equation. They are testing your importance." "And what is my importance?" The question hung in the air. Vargas turned from the window. "To Lucia, everything. To me," he hesitated, a crack in his perfect control. "A complication I did not anticipate but now cannot disregard. You have walked into the center of a long war, Maria. Isabella was a casualty of it. I will not allow Lucia to become another. And now, unintentionally, neither will you." He opened a drawer and pulled out a thin file, placing it on the desk between them. "You should understand what you are in the middle of." With a cold sense of dread, Maria opened it. Inside were not surveillance photos of rivals, but printouts, academic articles, news features. One headline read, "The Silent Epidemic, Language Deprivation in Deaf Children." Another, "Children of the Incarcerated, Invisible Victims." Sections were highlighted in yellow. Her own background, her mother's death, her time in foster care, her abandoned psychology studies, was summarized in clean bullet points. It was a dossier, but not on a threat. It was a dossier on her asterisk. "You had me investigated," she whispered, "the violation colder than any threat." "Before I ever stepped into the diner," he confirmed, no apology in his tone. "For 6 months I had people searching for tutors, for companions. The qualified ones saw a paycheck. The kind ones saw only the monster in the room. They could not see her asterisk." He tapped a highlighted section in one article. "You understand isolation. You understand loss that steals your voice. I did not create the connection between you and my daughter. I merely created the opportunity for it to exist. The revelation rewrote every moment. The first visit wasn't chance. It was a field test. Her kindness had been a variable in his calculation. The thought was nauseating. So I was a job interview, and I passed. Yes, he didn't flinch. But then something happened I did not calculate. I watched my daughter, who has not truly smiled since her mother was taken, smile at a stranger with a notepad. And I felt, he searched for the word, a debt and a desire. The air in the room changed. The confession was more intimate, more dangerous than any display of power. He was telling her she had become a weakness, a vulnerability he had not planned for. In his world, that was the most perilous thing to be. The door opened softly. Alina entered, her expression grave. "Vincent," she said, using his given name. "Raphael needs you. There is a development." Vargas's posture shifted instantly, the vulnerable man replaced by the commander. He followed his mother out, leaving Maria alone with the damning file. She sank into a chair, her mind reeling. She was a pawn who had become a queen, and the board was on fire. Minutes later, Vargas returned, his face a mask of cold fury. "The Delgado cartel," he said, each word clipped. "They have taken a person from the diner to send a clearer message." Ice flooded Maria's veins. "Who?" "Your coworker, the blonde one, Chloe." Maria's hands flew to her mouth. Chloe's frantic warnings echoed in her head. This is how it starts. She had been trying to protect Maria, and now she was gone, snatched off the street because of her association. The threat was no longer a text. It was a missing person. "We will get her back," Vargas stated, absolute certainty in his voice. "But you must understand the new reality. You cannot return to your life. Your apartment is being watched. The diner is compromised. You are here under my protection until this is resolved." "This is my fault," Maria breathed, guilt a physical weight. "No," Vargas said, crossing the room to stand before her. "This is the fault of men who see kindness as a weakness to exploit. You showed my daughter humanity. They see that as a lever to use against me. By threatening what is precious to you, they believe they can manipulate my actions." He knelt, bringing himself to her eye level, a mirror of her first gesture to Lucia. "I will get your friend back, but you must trust me, and you must make a choice. When this is over, you can walk away. I will give you enough money to start over somewhere far from here with a new name. No one will find you." He paused, his dark eyes holding hers. "Or you can stay, be part of this family. Help me give Lucia a life that is not just safe but happy. The choice will be yours, but for now there is no choice. You are here." The offer was staggering, an escape hatch, or a permanent place inside the fortress. Both were forms of captivity, one of distance, the other of proximity. Just then, Lucia appeared in the doorway in her pajamas, her hair damp. She held her notebook. She looked from her father, kneeling before Maria, to Maria's pale, shocked face. Slowly, she wrote and held up the pad. "Is Maria crying? Is she Leaving?" Vargas stood and went to his daughter, signing as he spoke. "No, asterisk, my corazon, asterisk. She is staying tonight. She is safe here." Lucia walked past him straight to Maria. She took Maria's hand and placed a small, carved wooden dolphin in her palm. It was warm from being held. Then she wrote in her notebook, "This one protects you. Mommy gave it to me. Now I give it to you." Tears Maria had been holding back spilled over. This child, who had lost everything, was offering her most sacred totem. In that moment, the calculus of dossiers and cartels fell away. This was real. This love was real. And it was being used as a weapon by men who understood nothing of it. Vargas's phone buzzed. He read the message, his jaw tightening. "They have made contact. They want to trade Chloe for a shipment of mine that crosses the river tonight." He looked at Maria. "They are not asking for money. They are asking me to betray my own operation, to show weakness." "And will you?" Maria asked, the words barely audible. Vargas looked at his daughter clinging to Maria's hand, then back at the phone. The conflict on his face was a war between the king and the father. If I do, they will own me. They will never stop taking if I do not. He didn't finish the sentence. The fate of Chloe, a woman he'd never met, hung in the balance. Raphael appeared in the doorway. The team is ready. We have a location. What are your orders, Chief? Vargas closed his eyes for a second. When he opened them, the father was gone. Only El Silencio remained. We do not trade, he said, his voice like gravel. We retrieve. Tell Hector to move the shipment as planned. We will take their scout, their outpost, and we will take our friend back. All of it tonight. It was a declaration of war, not a negotiation, a full-scale assault. Maria understood then that Chloe's life was now a single move in a much larger, more brutal game, and her own life and Lucia's happiness were the prizes at the end of it. Vargas turned to her. You will stay with my mother. You will not leave this house. No matter what you hear, do you understand? Maria could only nod, clutching the wooden dolphin. As Vargas and Raphael strode out, ready to unleash violence, she was left in the plush, silent prison of the study, with the ghost of Isabella in the photos, the echo of Chloe's warning, and the terrified, hopeful eyes of a little girl who had just given away her most precious protection. The waiting began, and with it, the horrifying understanding that her simple act of writing a note had not just started a friendship. It had lit the fuse on a war, and the explosion was coming tonight. The hours that followed were a lesson in a new kind of silence, not the peaceful quiet of a sleeping house, but the tense, breath-held silence of a bunker waiting for a shockwave. Elena made tea that went cold. Lucia drew picture after picture, her crayon scratching furiously. Every distant siren made Maria's heart stutter. The wooden dolphin was slick with sweat in her clenched fist. It was past 3 in the morning when the low rumble of vehicles sounded in the driveway. Not the smooth purr of the SUV, but the heavier growl of multiple engines. Maria rushed to the window, her breath fogging the glass. Vargas emerged from a dark van, his shirt sleeve torn, a dark smear on his jaw that wasn't shadow. Behind him, Raphael and 2 other men half-carried, half-supported a blanket-trapped figure. Chloe. They brought her inside, her face pale and streaked with dirt, her eyes wide and unblinking. Shock. Elena took charge, guiding her to a downstairs guest room, speaking in soft, maternal Spanish. Maria moved to follow, but Vargas's hand on her arm stopped her. His touch was gentle but absolute. She is safe, unharmed physically, but she has seen things. She will need time, he said, his voice thick with fatigue. The men who took her will not trouble anyone again. The Delgado outpost is closed. He didn't elaborate. He didn't need to. The finality in his tone said everything. The war had not been averted. It had been accelerated, and he had won the first brutal engagement. The cost was written in the grime on his clothes, in Chloe's hollow eyes, and in the new, permanent line of violence etched between his brows. And the scout, the one who sent the photo, Maria asked. Vargas met her gaze. Mateo Rosas is in a cooler at the riverfront warehouse. He will deliver a message back to his employers, a more persuasive one. Maria understood. The cycle wasn't broken. It was just beginning a new, more vicious rotation. She thought of the dossier of his calculated search. You knew this could happen. When you targeted me, you knew you were painting a target on my back. For the first time, he looked away, a flicker of something like shame crossing his features. I knew there was a risk. I believed my presence alone was a sufficient deterrent. I was wrong. Again. The word again hung in the air, heavy with the ghost of Isabella. Lucia, drawn by the commotion, stood at the bottom of the stairs. She looked at her father's bloody knuckles, at Maria's tear-streaked face. She didn't write. She simply walked over and wrapped her arms around Maria's waist, burying her face against her. The action was more eloquent than any note. It said, "You are mine. We are yours. This is real." In that moment, the calculation fell away. The manipulation, the danger, the terrifying power, it was all real. but so was this. This child's unconditional, desperate love. This family, however, twisted its foundation. Maria had spent her life since her mother's death feeling like a ghost, floating through a world that didn't feel her. Here, she was seen, needed, and fiercely protected. It was a cage, but for the first time, it wasn't empty. The dawn brought a grim clarity. Chloe, after a few hours of fitful sleep, was adamant. She wanted to go home. She wanted to forget. Raphael drove her with a new phone and an envelope of cash that was both compensation and a silent warning to never speak of this. The diner, they learned, had let Maria go. Frank, terrified of the attention, said her position was no longer available. Her old life had been efficiently erased overnight. Vargas presented her with the choice, as promised. A banker's draft for a life-changing sum of money and contacts who could give her a new identity in another state. Or the guest house on the property, renovated and hers. A role not as a servant but as Lucia's official tutor and companion. A place at the table. She walked the grounds that afternoon, the wooden dolphin in her pocket. She saw the high walls not just as barriers but as the reason the garden inside could bloom. She thought of the research, the 70%. Lucia was in the 30% now because of her, because of a note. If she left, that connection would be severed and the silence would creep back in. She found Vargas in Isabella's studio, now Lucia's sanctuary. He was staring at a portrait of his wife. "I loved her," he said without turning. "It did not protect her. I care for you. It will not protect you either. It may do the opposite." "I'm not asking for protection," Maria said, her voice stronger than she felt. "I'm asking for a deal." He turned, intrigued. "I live in the guest house. I am Lucia's tutor. But I also enroll in online courses to finish my degree in child psychology. You pay for it, and you use your resources to do one thing, not less violence, more good." "What good?" he asked, skepticism narrowing his eyes. "You find other kids like her. Deaf kids in the system, kids with parents in prison, kids everyone ignores, and you fund them. You get them into schools like Westgate. You get them tutors. You build a program, not with your name on it. A silent partner." She took a breath. "You turn the machinery you built for fear into something that builds futures. That's my price." Vargas was silent for a long time, studying her as if seeing a new blueprint. "You would use my money, born from blood, to clean wounds you did not make." "Yes, because it's there, and because it's the only thing that might make any of this mean something." A slow, genuine smile touched his lips, the one that transformed him. "You continue to surprise me, Maria Ruiz." He extended his hand. "We have a deal." She took it. The handshake was a contract sealing her fate. Life did not become a fairy tale. It became a complex, guarded normalcy. Maria moved into the sunny guest house. Lucia's progress was swift and stunning. With consistent, loving interaction, her written language exploded. She started art therapy. She began, tentatively, to use a voice output device, not to replace signing but to add another tool. The first time she used it to say, "Good morning, Maria," they both cried. The Vargas Family Foundation for Deaf Children and Children of the Incarcerated was incorporated 6 months later. Its board was comprised of legitimate experts. Its funding source was untraceable. The first grant paid for an entire ASL immersion classroom at a public school in the city's poorest district. Maria and Vargas did not become a traditional romance. They became partners in a shared, dangerous project, raising a child and laundering a legacy. There was affection, deep and complicated. There was respect. There were nights where the violence of his world knocked at the gate and he would leave, and she would wait with that same breath-held silence, praying for his return. The final surprise came on Lucia's 10th birthday. They were in the garden, Lucia showing Maria her latest drawings. Vargas watched from the terrace. Lucia, filled with cake and joy, was trying to get her father's attention. She called out, not with her device, not with a sign. She used her voice, a raw, unpracticed but clear sound, "Papa." The word hung in the air, fragile and monumental. Vargas froze, his glass halfway to his lips. He looked at Maria, his eyes wide with a disbelief that bordered on fear. Then he was moving, crossing the garden in swift strides, kneeling before his daughter. "Again, mi corazon asterisk," he whispered, his own voice breaking. "Say it again." "Papa," Lucia said, softer now, a smile breaking across her face like the sun. He pulled her into a crushing hug, his shoulders shaking. Over her head, his eyes found Maria. In them was a gratitude so profound it erased every sin, every calculation, every moment of terror. She had given him back his daughter's voice, not just through notes, but by helping Lucia feel safe enough, connected enough, to unlock the sound trauma had stolen. The path that began with a scribbled question on an order pad had led here, to a reclaimed voice in a fortified garden, to foundation changing lives, to a love built not on fairy tales, but on a fierce, chosen loyalty. Maria had walked into the heart of a dangerous man's world, not as a prisoner, but as an architect. She built a bridge for a lonely girl, and in doing so, built a new life for them all from the broken pieces of the old. The silence was over. So, what is the true weight of a single act of connection? The story of Maria and Lucia is more than a dramatic tale of crime and compassion. It is a living case study in the neuroscience of neglect and the healing power of being seen. The research we cited at the beginning is not abstract. It is the story of millions of children, the 70% who experience language deprivation, the deaf children who are the only deaf person in their family, their school, their world. Maria's note was a lifeline because it landed in a specific, devastating silence, a silence created by fear of her father and compounded by the world's unwillingness to learn a new way to communicate. Eduardo Vargas built a fortress to keep violence out. In doing so, he unknowingly built a prison for his daughter's spirit. Maria did not storm the gates. She slipped a note underneath them. And in that simple, replicable act, asking a question, making an effort, she did what all the money and power could not. She made the invisible child feel real. The foundation they created, funded by illicit wealth but run with legitimate purpose, is the paradox at the heart of this story. Can a tool built for control be repurposed for liberation? Can a legacy of fear be redirected into a future of hope? Their answer, however messy and morally complicated, is a tentative yes. Lucia's voice, once locked away by trauma, did not return through surgery or a miracle cure. It returned because her brain, finally receiving the consistent, loving interaction it needed during its critical developmental window, began to rewire. The silence was not a life sentence. It was a condition, treatable by human connection. The lesson here is not that you should befriend a drug lord. The lesson is that the barriers around the isolated people in your world are often less solid than they appear. They are built from our own fear, our assumptions, our awkwardness. A note, a learned sign, a moment of direct eye contact, these are the gentle tools that can begin to dismantle them. Maria saw a lonely girl, not a dangerous burden. And in choosing to see her, she altered the trajectory of multiple lives, including her own. She walked into a gilded cage and found, within it, the family she had lost and a purpose she had never dreamed of. The world is full of silent Lucias, waiting for someone to be brave enough or kind enough to write the first note. The question the story leaves us with is this: in the course of your ordinary day, who have you been trained not to see? And what might happen if you simply acknowledged them? If you found this exploration of human connection against all odds compelling, there are more stories like it waiting for you. Subscribe now and join us next time.